Okay, well, I think we're rolling. So, yeah. Any final requests, James, before we begin?
No.
Right.
Final requests.
Before this torment begins.
What would you like for your last meal?
And your misery.
Okay, when you're ready, Matt, go.
Welcome to episode 44 of The Picky Bastards, the podcast where we take music far too seriously and we don't take each other seriously at all. As always, I'm joined by Nick.
Hello.
Hello, Nick.
How are you? I'm doing well.
I'm good. Very good. Very excited to talk about some music. And we're going to be talking about music with James Spearing. Hello.
Hello. Good to be back.
Yeah.
Hello.
For those of you who don't know, James is one of the editors on thepiggybees.com.
Yeah.
And
You've been on once before, haven't you? Is it twice or once? Just once before, yeah.
About a year ago.
Yeah. So we don't need to do all the intro questions or anything like that.
No.
I think the only thing we need to update people on is you're like dry cleaning and you're the only one.
And Tom.
And, well, yeah.
There are two of us.
You're not alone.
Could you just do one podcast without mentioning it again?
As long as we get through a podcast without doing in the shadow of, I just don't want that in the shadow of ever to be fucking referred to again, basically.
Too late.
Yeah, I fucked it up
This is the new meta. The dry cleaning is the new meta.
God for that. Take me off the pressure off me now.
Okay, so anyway, we're going to be talking about some music this time, as per usual, and we have 6 albums, and I'm just going to list them out. We have the new releases: Dean Blunt, Vigil, Kele with The Waves Part 2, Laura and Mvula with Pink Noise, Stubborn Heart with Made of Static. Then we have the classic release, which is Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814. And James is going to be talking about a band he loves, which is New Young Pony Club, in the form of a playlist. And so to get things going, I'm going to start by asking James a question. And that question is, what album was the flattest?
Great question, I've got to say. You've done well there. After this many years of doing episodes, it's hard to think of new questions, so that's quite cool.
Yeah.
Jump in there on that.
Well,
yeah.
I have a big list of adjectives surrounding music that I can use.
So, James, the floor is yours.
Yeah. We've been talking over you, so
We do let me answer the damn question. So I think this was a bit of a toss-up between Stubborn Heart and Dean Blunt, but on balance, because there were some surprises on the Dean Blunt, and for me the Stubborn Heart was disappointing. So I'm going to go with Stubborn Heart as the flattest. I think the reason why. Every single album on this list, I had no trouble listening to. It held my attention. Things were catching my ear. I could be doing anything else. I could be working. I could be cooking. I could be driving, whatever. Stubborn Heart, every single time, I had to sort of kick myself back into listening to it. It just sort of drifted out of my consciousness. I had to think, I'm supposed to be concentrating on this album. I've got to talk about it in a week. And it just really didn't hold my attention. And the reason it was disappointing is I really liked their first album. It came out about 8 years ago, and then they completely disappeared. So it took me as a surprise that they were going to bring out a new one this year. And I don't know if...
So, sorry, you were a fan of the previous work, you're saying?
I really liked it. I think I'd come to it in a different way because I'd heard maybe 2 or 3 songs that I really liked before I got the album. This time around... it was completely out of the blue. There was no sort of prep for it. And there were a couple of tracks that stood out, but not anywhere near as good as the last one. I really wanted to like it more, being previously a fan, but this just didn't really feel like it had made any progress in the 8 years that they'd been away. It was like not even album 1, part 2. It was like the songs that didn't make it onto the first album. You know, just a bit
B-side
dull, and just like I said, it just wouldn't hold my attention. The only thing that did hold my attention, for the wrong reasons, was on the song. What was it? Everything Matters. So have you heard those smart doorbells you can get, the ones that you can like link up to your phone?
Yeah.
You can see who's at your door.
Yeah.
There's a noise in the middle of that song that sounds exactly like one of those doorbells ringing, and that's all I could think about, and it just put me right off.
Well,
and then there's another
maybe
one.
someone someone rang on his door in the middle of production.
Maybe.
Just
Thought,
went with it, yeah. Got to roll with the punch, don't you, when you're making
Just
music,
stick it in.
yeah, so...
And then there's just some sort of odd lyrics in there as well. There's one song about Stephanie, and it's like some weird minor misdemeanor in the office, like about Stephanie being late again. Watch out for the boss. It's just odd.
Yeah.
Just really odd. Like, why is that in a song? Didn't get it. So yeah, flat.
Okay.
Disappointing.
Right. Matt, you want to go or me?
Well, you jump in.
Okay. So I quite strongly disagree on this album, which is a good start, isn't it? First of all, I have no context for the previous album, don't know them at all, so I can't speak to whether this is better or worse or B-sides or any of that stuff. But to me, this album was quite refreshingly inventive, actually. So in that sense, certainly not flat, I've got to be honest. And I think it managed to do quite a good job of balancing between being inventive in certain respects, but also being melodically clear at a good deal of the time. So it wasn't like, it didn't sort of fall apart. It still held together as tracks, but it had some interesting both sounds and production styles and song arcs and stuff like that. So I always thought the vocals were nice. I like the vocals. I think there's two songs in particular, Proves to Be and Against the Tide, which work together as kind of a 1-2 sort of high point in the album, although I realise they're fairly early on, aren't they? But there are some tracks that do fall flat. For me, like I think Everything Matters, I found it a bit kind of grating and incoherent, to be honest. But I still felt like it was
And
quite...
it's got a doorbell noise in the middle.
That's the one with the doorbell, is it? I've got the one over. I didn't particularly pick up on the doorbell, but maybe that is the reason it was grating, yeah. But I think I still felt like at least they were trying to take some small risks. I felt like they were doing something a bit unusual. And that's really why I was drawn to it. And I probably will go back to this, actually. I wouldn't say I'm absolutely in love with it, but I thought it had some interesting things to say, musically speaking. I wasn't particularly drawn lyrically to anything, but I thought it was interesting musically. And we'll come into the context of how it fits with the rest of this playlist, but I think it's quite interesting in that respect as well. So we'll come back to that, I suppose. Yeah. So that was me on that one.
I think it still is.
Yeah.
I think it still is interesting. The thing I don't disagree with the things you say about the vocal style.
No, you need to disagree. I'm sorry, that's not allowed. You've already gone through that. You can't change the record now.
I'm doing different things, but coming from someone who knew the first album really well and hearing all that stuff being new 8 years ago,
I see what you're saying.
and just doing it again now, just meh.
That would definitely have ruined it for me. I see what you're saying, but obviously I'm not aware at all.
Yeah, definitely. If you like it, definitely go
yeah.
back to that first album.
Really?
Give it a
Okay.
listen. Yeah.
What's the first one called again? Do you remember?
Ooh, I can't remember. Maybe it's
I'll
just
look it
called
up.
Stubborn Heart, actually.
Okay, I'll look it up. Definitely, yeah.
I think, there was very much a moment when you were talking about it, James, where you let out this sigh that I recognise so much from like coming back to an artist, or an artist comes back with an album and you're just like, this is it. And I think my overall feelings on this album is very much in between you guys. I thought, again, you used that word interesting. There were moments where I was just like, oh, that's cool. Especially the start of the album, which I think Nick already picked up on. I think it's an album of two halves. The beginning, it's like there's a lot of like shifting and morphing, and there's some cool songs. You've already picked up on the that pairing of Proves to Be and Against the Tide, and I really like how anxiety-inducing Proves to Be is, and then it just goes to Against the Tide, which is just fun. It's very like a very fun song.
Yep.
But then like halfway through the album, maybe 2/3 of the way, I don't know. It just goes down a couple gears and just never recovers, and it's like they're just coasting to the end, and they've already put the effort in, and it's just like kind of just let's just see this out nice and easy.
Was this an example then where you were into the previous album, or are you talking about just generally when that happens to you?
Oh no, I haven't.
Okay, right.
Heard them before.
I
was talking. James's sigh was just very recognisable for me for other instances where I've been let down. But yeah, so like, I feel like this had enough for me to like grab onto for this playlist, but definitely not enough for me to look back. But maybe if the other album is significantly better, then it'll be worth me looking that one up instead. But yeah, I feel like this had such a merge of styles that I should have been into it.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised.
It feels like
yeah.
Well, because it's almost like subtract means James Blake meets, I don't know, Baths or something. But it's just, interesting to start with and then just like drops off.
Right.
So that started well. Nick,
Full
shall we
range.
switch to you and ask you what album you thought was the most active?
Yeah, again, good question. I think I thought about it. Actually, it was fairly easy to answer for me. I suppose the Laura Mvula, the Pink Noise album. I had been a big fan of the Mercury-nominated one, Sing to the Moon, which I don't think it was the first, maybe it was the second, I can't remember. That one I thought was fantastic. She had a really, really striking voice, and she had amazing harmony work, like 3 or 4 layered harmonies on that album. And this album strikes me as a major departure. It's got a lot of the same harmony work, but it's far more kind of hard-hitting and energetic, what's the word? The danceable kind of energy behind it is very noticeable, which is why I thought that active was the right word to use, in reference to it. So it was clearly still her voice, but she's got a lot of different instrumentation set up behind it, so it was much less delicate. I thought it was a refreshing change of direction overall, even though I liked the last one. I think I preferred the last one, but I still think it was kind of fun, I say energetic, as I said, and again, it's difficult because we're starting off early on the discussion, but in relation to some of the other albums on this list, I think I want to come back to talk about it a bit later as well, because I think it has some interesting sort of differences from some of the people we're going to be talking about. So, but no, I think it was strong, and I will listen to it again. But it was one of those albums where it kind of made me partly feel like remind me to go back to Sing to the Moon, rather than listen to this one as much as I might, But it was definitely solid, and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you reckon, James?
I agree definitely that it is very fun and definitely very active. There is a lot going on, big with loads of synths and horns and all sorts. I still, like you said, a great voice, but with all that going on, and there've been quite a lot of effect on the vocals in many of the songs. It was lost a bit. So I was more familiar with her first album, which is much more kind of jazzy influenced than this one, being just a big sort of 80s in-your-face pop style. Very, very different sound from that. At its best, super fun. There was one song that was clearly a big homage to Michael Jackson, and that was a great one for dancing around the kitchen too. But then it went the other way in some places as well. There's a song with the guy from Biffy Clyro.
I didn't know that. Oh dear, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that was.
I'm gonna redo my review again now. If we could.
That was a real low.
Surprise when I heard his voice.
Yeah, it almost sounds like he's throughout the album. If you listen to the backing vocals, it sounds like he's in there maybe all the way through. But that was a quite low on the album.
He's Simon Neil, is he? Is that Simon Neil?
Yeah, Simon Neil.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that at all. Right.
That was a real low for me, that song. But it's probably the least it was the least active. It was the least fun. It was kind of slow. So maybe that was why. But yeah, some absolute storming tunes on there, like Church Girl. But yeah, I feel like on this, because I'd listened to it a bit before. Yeah. It was an artist that I was interested in before we agreed to do it on the podcast. Knowing that it's on the Mercury list as well, it's going to be listened to a lot more.
Yeah,
like, I'm done. Yeah. With it now. I really need a break from this album. I need to come back to it in a few months, and I think I'll like it again. But right now, I've had enough of it, and it's just got me thinking about the whole longevity of the 80s, and there's so many albums like The Weeknd, like Dua Lipa, from the last few years that are doing this 80s thing, and I feel like I've had enough of that now as well. We need something else. Can the 90s come back? Can the noughties come back? Can we get a new influence?
Yeah, maybe actually something new would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which part of the 90s?
I don't know. 1997. I've no idea. Just
Britpop.
Maybe. No, don't need a Britpop comeback. But yeah, just not another 80s album.
It's so interesting we're doing Janet Jackson as well, isn't it, on this playlist in a minute. So yeah, I suppose we'll come back and connect the two. But yeah, when you say about the 80s stuff, yeah, absolutely. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in and I think we're all kind of on the same page. Like, it's good in parts. It's a medium album. It's solid, but it's to pick up on what you were saying at the end there, James, the longevity. I initially, when I first liked it, it was like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. And then as the month wore on, I was just like, this no real novelty in this.
No.
also picked up on Laura and Mvula on her first album and was really into it. And I feel like the issues I have with this is that her strength is her voice, and all of the stuff going on detracts from her voice. And so I'm sure creatively this must have been super fun for her to just kind of break free of what she was maybe doing before. But in doing so, she maybe sacrificed some of her like uniqueness and
it must
like
be really frustrating though, just to interject.
selling point almost.
Just to interject that, it must be really frustrating for her, like to have a voice that's that distinctive and strong, as to feel limited in that way. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is she to do in that situation? She's made a really beautiful album, Mercury-nominated album, and now she's got to sort of, I don't know, can she reinvent herself? Is that? It sounds like you're saying she's to stick with what she's really good at. And I can see your point, but I don't know. It's a difficult situation. I feel like for her.
But there's ways to do it, right? This album is so full. It's so fun and shiny, and it's dense with all these these rich synths and these like drum machines, that it kind of just, her voice then shrinks a bit almost as a result. Like, she can keep evolving. There's so many people evolving in interesting ways, and like her, like the way she built music before, it wasn't particularly complicated, but she could have added more in a slightly different way. And but again, it is one of those things of like, if she's having fun being creative, then like that's the most important thing for her as an artist, right? So
I get the feeling she made this album for her because she wanted to have fun. I admire that.
I mean, I guess the other aspect of that is, it's for me, these songs were fun, but to really match this 80s aesthetic, you have to have that earworm. You have to get right into people's head, to full homage, right? You have something like Michael Jackson that's never going to leave for decades. And I don't think any of the songs I thought about after the album.
That's a really good point.
I think to remember them.
I totally see what you say. That's really interesting. I think it is a very complicated structure, isn't it, to all the songs? I think James said that as well. Maybe that means the 80s, I don't know, what's the real goal, I suppose. You're right. In that sense, it's too complex to be an 80s homage, but it sounds like it's got a lot of 80s influences. That's really an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that at all.
But I'm not necessarily looking forward to having to listen to this for another month before the Mercury. But we'll do it for Picky Bastards. We'll do it. We'll take one for the team. Okay. So let's go back to James. Do you want to tell us an album maybe you're more positive about, if you've got one?
I will tell you about the Kele album.
Cool.
Go for it.
So I hate to say it, but if you read Fran's review of this album on the site,
I actually avoided reading it because I knew it was coming up on the podcast. So
okay.
Yeah. Well, also, I try and avoid reading anything that Fran ever writes. I just want to put that out there. So.
Well, maybe I'm going to save you from reading it now because it pretty much nailed it. Pretty much nailed it. I'd liken it to sort of catching up unexpectedly with an old friend that you've not seen for years, but you instantly have that spark and just get straight back on with straight again. So I know Fran and I are big fans of Block Party, who Kele was the frontman for, especially that first album, Silent Alarm, and it's like going back to that in a sort of more nostalgic, more chilled out way. There's still some new stuff on there, but also familiar. It's kind of best bits of the noughties here and there, piecing things together. So songs that it reminded me of from that Block Party album. There's a song called Bluest Light, and a song on this new album, One Who Held You Up, really familiar parallels there. And sort of, not direct homage, but sort of just little snippets that sound like other bands that take you back to that time. How to Beat the Lie Detector being the main one. That's like a big kind of, almost got a sing-along chorus. You can imagine him being in a tent at Reading Festival with the whole crowd screaming that chorus back at him. There's an emotional kind of punch, and he really comes across. He's always had that sort of seething, angsty tone to his voice, and that still comes across. Even though the instrumentation is stripped right back, because it's just him and his guitar, a little bit of piano. There's no drums or percussion on the album, and then got a contrast with these instrumentals as well, which are also really, really very dramatic. and emotional. I feel like they didn't necessarily fit in with the album that well. They'd be brilliant for some sort of soundtrack. So they're a bit of a surprise, but I didn't hate them. And then we've also got this cover of a classic song, the Bronski Beat song, Small Town Boy, which is great as well. And yeah, obviously he's been away from Block Party for several years now, but he's clearly still got it as a songwriter and a singer. The song From a Place of Love is fantastic from that point of view. Superb guitar playing. Just, yeah, really unexpected gem, this. It wasn't... If it hadn't come up on this, I doubt I would have listened to it at all. You'd think, oh, it is Kele. I used to like Block Party and just sort of never really give it the time of day, but I'm really glad I was made to listen to it because it was great.
Cool.
Matt, do you want to go? Should I?
Yeah, I can jump in. So, like, I did like this album quite a lot. I liked it more than I was expecting. I've listened to his solo projects that he's released so far, and I feel like they were just slowly declining. But this was kind of like a complete shift in what he was doing, I think, on his solo and for a solo record. And I think it's definitely a positive change. It's much more like like you were saying, he's very emo, and that was there with Block Party, but because of the way it is stripped back, it becomes that mood is much more resonant throughout the entire song, because you don't have that like peppy, angular, dueling guitars at the front and the really like fast-paced drums. And so it was quite interesting hearing that stylings in quite like a different backdrop to what it was before.
I love that dueling guitars image, by the way. That sums up Block Party so well, I think. You're right, with that first album. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is Block Party, probably the band I've seen more times live than any other band.
Really? How many times is that, would you say?
I think around 10 times, maybe. Because I used to see, every time they toured, I saw them. Right. And then they were at every single festival I went to. And I'd always see them. And they're always such good value for money as well. They're fantastic live. But like for this, I liked a lot of it. But one of the things that really annoyed me was I thought, when it's so stripped back, he maintained the same kind of tone to his guitar, and it became a little bit much because it almost completely dominated anything else he had going on, and like his vocals or whatever else, if there was anything else going on. It just was so, I don't know, like felt like it was almost in the like, you know, when if a noise is really loud but also kind of high, you can almost feel it in the back of your teeth.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's just me, but it felt like that
I get that
expression. Yeah. And so I was just like, it's a bit much. I don't know. But generally it was good. I liked it. I think for me it felt like a step in the right direction. I want him to keep doing stuff like this. The stuff that was just instrumental was amazing. I thought he has a real skill for that.
Okay.
I really like that. So yeah, I'm excited for what he does next.
Has he done soundtracks?
Maybe. I'm always surprised by what people have done, and I didn't realise. I wouldn't be surprised if he's done like an indie film at some point. But he could definitely do it for sure.
Okay, shall I jump in?
Yeah, go for it, Nick.
So yeah, I often do like a long... I notice in myself, I do like a long preamble to like when I make these comments on albums. So I think I'll just cut to the chase and say I absolutely hated this album. I thought it was awful, really, really awful. But I'll give you now the preamble. Now I've just done the punchline first, which is I've had a tough journey with Block Party in general. So I thought the first album, Silent Alarm, was amazing, as did I think every single person in the Western world. Maybe it was huge, I know, and it was everywhere. And I did love it, but I saw them live in Boston, must have been about 2006 or 7, and they came across pretty poorly. It's funny you say about they were so good live. I thought they were really bad live. I really did. They had a moment where they were like literally doing like I can't know if it's lighters or just waving. They had like a put your arms in the air and wave above your head kind of thing, like clap along sort of deal to get the audience going. And I just thought, fucking hell, this is so tired. And I just thought they just didn't seem like they gave a monkeys really or had a lot to offer beyond the original tracks. But there's follow-up albums that they did and then that he's done solo, which I have sort of followed to some extent. I think I've got increasingly run out of ideas, and this project, this album, I think increases that trend, that direction, that trend. Wow. It feels really directionless. It's not catchy. It's not engaging. He has a nice voice, but he's kind of talk singy sort of elements in the start of the album, at least. Sort of, I think, deflates the song's energy. Several of the songs' energy. It feels like he's throwing ideas around, but nothing is sort of melodically caught on yet. So I think on reflection, there was a lot of talk about him personally beyond the band. You know, when the band sort of either split up or took hiatus or whatever, that he was like going to do incredible stuff on his own. And I really feel like he's massively overrated. And I just think it's been unfortunate to see him continuing to get this attention. As I've seen several good reviews of this album around and about. Sort of saying he's on and he's back and all that, and I just feel like other people need the attention, not him, because it's weak. So if that's not, you want some sparks and you got them. Yeah, it was awful, really awful.
Weak.
Okay.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
I was concerned that we were agreeing too much last time. You know, I think Sam said that as well. So yeah, it's good that we broke that cycle.
We did break that cycle for sure. I don't think we were agreed on any of them so far.
Sounds like I disagree with Fran as well. Then I'll now be able to read his review, and that's sort of, you know, hitting two birds with one stone, really, if I disagree with Fran as well. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. In his absence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Cool. Why don't you start one, Matt?
Yeah, I'll start one. I'm going to talk about. Let's see. Let's talk about Janet Jackson.
Okay.
And so I thought this was a lot different to what I was expecting. I like immediately when I pulled up all this track listing, and I was just like, wow, there's all these interludes in here, and it reminds me of like a modern day album. I hadn't seen that in an album that was maybe 20. Is it 20? How many years? 30 years old?
30.
35 years old?
35? No way. Come on. Is it? Oh my God. That's so depressing.
I think it was out in 89, 90.
80, yeah, it's 89. So that's close to 35.
Yeah.
30 to 35.
Sad story.
Yeah. So I was technically born when this album came out, but I definitely wasn't listening to it. 6 months.
Yeah, thank you. We always have to get to that point in the episode, don't we? Every single one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, just to remind you that you're old.
Exactly.
Do you remember this coming out?
Me?
Yeah. How old were you?
I mean, I remember I was 89. I was 13. So I mean, I heard it and I knew she was about and stuff. I wasn't really following, but yeah, she was very high profile, and yeah, so definitely. Although her brother, you know, kind of eclipsed her fame for a number of years, but she kept the credibility longer term, didn't she? I feel like so. Yeah. Anyway, that's another story. Yeah.
But yeah, I like really. Like as a concept album, I kind of bought in because it did seem to have this kind of theme and narrative throughout. It was trying to do a lot of interesting things, which for like what should be, I'm assuming, like a regular pop record of the time, seemed very ambitious. This whole idea of this rhythm nation utopia. It seems incredibly simplistic, but like why not try for something a bit more interesting than just like create another record? And it did get like quite pointed at times. I thought it was like you have this very iconic sound, and though it does sound a little dated at points, like she's creating like towards the end she has these ballads, and then they're very, very like velvety, but then she ends one of them with like these drums that sound like a machine gun, and then it starts talking about a school shooting, and it's just like, what is going on? Like, it's jam-packed full of ideas, and so I did find it very interesting. The thing I came back to, I actually had a conversation with my father-in-law about this album yesterday, and asked him what he remembers from when the album came out.
How old was he?
And
don't answer that.
Yeah, old enough.
Okay, fair enough.
And he remembers it being a really big deal and this furore around it and feeling like it was an event. But then when he actually got to the music, he was like, this is just fine. And so for me, I got drawn into some of the like event surrounding the way the album was dressed. And there's some interesting parts in it. But musically, I found much more interesting reading the Wikipedia page about this album than actually listening to it. I did that a lot as well.
Oh, yeah? I never did the research. I have no idea anything about that.
It's fascinating, but also like It's not going to be something I really listen to again, I don't think. Do you want to take us off, James?
Go for it, James. Yeah.
But half that Wikipedia page is just the credits of all the hundreds and thousands of musicians that were on this album. Because the production is crazy big. It's just there's so much going on all the time. So many ideas crammed into every single song, and then the next one's different. And you kind of said quite a lot of the same things I was going to say, Matt. I started thinking about back to how was I aware of it at the time when it came out. I don't think I was, but the overall sound of it, which, as you said, is really dated now, really cliched, but that kind of took me back to just a time where I think I was probably just first aware of pop music, be it from the radio or Top of the Pops, whatever, just whatever that sound is. I don't know what you call it, just the sound of pop music in 1989, 1990. But yeah, I feel like I was aware of it at the time without really knowing what it was, and haven't really experienced it, I guess, for many, many years, and took me right back to that. So that was interesting. And you touched on the idea of the concept album, but wow, is it really there? It sort of starts like it's going to be. There's these sort of interludes with these news snippings, and then she even gets to a point where she says, "Get the point, now let's dance," and that's it. And then there's about 10 more songs that are just pop songs that have got nothing to do with this concept about social injustice and poverty and the crack epidemic that she touches on. And then it comes back to it on one song later on, in the ballad section towards the end that you mentioned, living in a world that didn't make. But any message is absolutely lost in the sticky cheese fondue of that ballad song. It's just so confusing. Wow. And then it even goes.
That's what Rhythm Nation's going to be like, right? It's going to be cheesy and everyone's going to be dancing.
Yeah. There'll be bullets flying across the dance floor. We'll just ignore them.
Dance away out of political crisis, basically. Yeah. So.
The reason I picked it was because I kind of stumbled across it on Twitter or somewhere. I don't know, but it seemed to be this huge album with loads of stuff around it at the time. But I'd never heard of it before. I'd never considered listening to a Janet Jackson album before. And it's weird that we mentioned Simon Neil from Biffy Clyro already, because it came around when I was reviewing the Biffy Clyro album last year. I read an interview with him, and he said he was really, really inspired by this Janet Jackson album.
Really?
When producing the latest Biffy Clyro album, which I thought was mad. So I thought, at that point, I've got to listen to it. It's got to go on the Picky Bastards classic playlist.
Absolutely.
It's just... So it's obviously got a huge legacy to it still, but it has totally escaped me.
Fascinating.
I think the other thing I was going to mention was that the song Black Cat, out of nowhere, you've got this sort of parody of somebody like Motley Crue or something, but it's an absolute tragedy of music cliche now. It just sounds so poor. But you've got to be impressed with the sort of ambition of it, the attempt at a concept, and the production. Wow, I've not had anything like that. Contemporary I could compare it to. Even the Laura and Mvula, we said there's a lot going on, there's that 80s sound. This is nothing on
no comparison. 10% that's right,
of this Janet Jackson album.
I mean, that's really... Sorry, you done? Should I jump in?
I
was just going to say, that's so interesting you say about that. I think that as I think about what are we talking about when we're talking about 80s, whether it's Laura Mvula is 80s, and whether, obviously this Janet Jackson is a classic 80s album. And I think the scale of it is really one of the big indicators, isn't it? I mean, this is the period of, to me, when I think back of these epic albums, like MJ's albums and stuff like that, were all... everybody was on them, everybody was featured, everybody was, there were 50 musicians, orchestras, and, it was just a huge exercise in production. And I think you make a really good point as well, James, about I didn't notice that particular phrase where she says, what did she say? Something like, no, you heard that, now let's dance. Or
you got the point, now let's dance.
You got the point, now let's dance. I think that really typifies where the problems lie with this album. So I mean, I'll back up though and say there were some things I liked. It was very cleverly put together. It was very thought out, very intentful, very, very kind of polished and styled in a way that wasn't just thrown together. You can definitely say that, you know. And I think there are so many newer artists that lean on it. Although I wasn't thinking of Biffy Clyro, but there's a lot of other more recent artists who lean on it a lot. And I think that in that sense, it's extremely influential. You have to sort of give her credit for that as well. Her voice is, pretty much pitch perfect throughout. And I think I'm right in saying it's before there was any form of auto-tune software. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was in that few years period when the auto-tune started to appear, but I'm pretty sure she's working, at least 90%, or just pure off her own vocals, which is great. And the strongest track as well, I thought melodically going into that side of things was "Love Will Never Do." I thought that was kind of very kind of beautifully put together. So that's all the positives. Now onto the negatives. I thought it didn't move me at all, and I think you both really touched on some of the reasons. It was, first of all, the political sides to it, which I knew it wanted to get in there and try and make those statements, and I realised any major artist has a real dilemma trying to make an album that has any value or sort of meaningful themes, because they have to try and throw that stuff in there while still making us dance in a club or whatever, So that's so difficult, and I sympathise with that. At the same time, this was not a successful attempt at that, as I think you both hinted, because I think ultimately she was throwing in ideas here and there that weren't really followed through or consistently. There was no narrative sort of arc to them. That was a big problem. And the other big problem was the polish. While I said it was very cleverly put together, it was really sort of had a sheen on it, a kind of polish on it to the nth degree, where it just made me feel like it smothered the musicality of it. I mean, you can stuff 100 quality professional musicians into a recording, but if you make it that minutely polished, it just becomes flat. In fact, that's the one I would have picked for the flat. The sort of your question, James, at the start, that you picked the Stubborn Heart. I would have gone with Janet Jackson for that, because it was really, really a flat experience, which is really unfortunate. I can sort of respect it and see where it's come from, but I certainly won't be going back, and I just felt like it ultimately was swallowed in its own grandiose goals, try and make this massive album which also covered all these political themes, and as you suggested, had all different types of bands involved in it, so I wasn't really a fan.
It would be interesting to think if some of the because we have a lot of pop albums that are succeeding at what this is aiming at these days. And so it'd be interesting to I don't know if they were influenced by this, or whether it is just kind of it's 30 years old, so people just don't think about it anymore.
I'd be surprised. I would have thought a lot of people think about it. I would have thought it's still hugely influential, but
If you Clyro do.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more regular album to talk about. So,
I think you misnamed it, by the way. It's Black Metal, isn't it? Black Metal 2 is that the name of the album? I think you called it
Black
Vigil.
Metal 2.
Black Metal 2 is the name of the album.
Is Vigil his previous?
It's the first song off it. Is Vigil.
Okay.
Yeah.
My bad.
Your apologies accepted.
Apologies. Black Metal 2. Oh, because his previous album was Black Metal Part 1.
That would follow.
So, why don't we get James to start us off?
Go for it.
Sure. So with this, I really didn't know what to expect coming into it. Obviously, it's called black metal. I was pretty sure before I hit play that it wasn't going to be black metal.
Were you relieved by that?
But then looking at the cover and it being that obvious, well, yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting to do a black metal album.
I suppose.
I've not listened to any sort of black metal for at least 20 years. But with the obvious homage to Dr. Dre on the cover, I was then thinking, okay, this is going to be quite a straightforward hip-hop album. But then it wasn't that either. And then start listening to it, get into a little bit of a sample here, get into a little bit of groove there. Even some acoustic guitar appears. You get some nice kind of floaty backing vocals, which are pretty nice. And I just spent a long time thinking about what was going on. And by the time I'd even failed to get my head around it, it had finished. 20 minutes, it was done. And then I'm left thinking, is this even an album at all? Is this not just a sort of an EP? It's so short, and there's so many good ideas, admittedly good ideas, but they never really fully seem to develop or get realised into full songs. They kind of just go before he's maybe even worked out himself what he's going to do with them. So there's a lot to like in those ideas, but I just felt a little bit cheated, like they hadn't really had the chance to blossom and become a song that you could really, really get into. Songs that I liked, there's Zaza. It's a good, I think it's like a kind of sample repeated there, guitar riff and a great groove. But even within that short song, they're only in it for about 30 seconds, and it's almost wasted. The song, I guess you could call it Wusa.
Yep.
I don't know how you pronounce it.
Yep.
That was pretty good as well. But then the other side, it really kind of dragged in places. La Raza, that kind of up and down guitar in that, just really, really, really slow and kind of tedious. Are either of you fans of Peep Show?
Yep.
Yeah.
So in the first, there's an episode where Jez gets a job in a recording studio, and he decides to step out of his role of making coffee and give the band some advice. And what he tells them not to do is to play how they're playing now. And he says, "Fucking hell, we're playing the fucking song. When's it gonna finish?" And that La Raza on this just reminded me of that. It's like, oh, I can't be bothered to strum the guitar properly. I'm just going to go up and down. When's the song? Unfortunately, it did finish in about a minute and a half because none of the songs are very long. But there's a lot of potential here, though, that side. I'd like to see like the real album beyond this EP or demo or whatever it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm being harsh, but I'm a little bit stuck there. I couldn't really get beyond that.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in, and I echo a lot of the things. It did feel like a lot of them were almost demos in the sense a lot of his vocals felt like voice memos he'd recorded to himself.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, this is an idea for a song, and I'm just going to do this, and then maybe we'll do the instrumentation like this. I don't know, and he's kind of roughly putting it together, which I think. I hadn't heard or didn't really know what to expect at all. And when the first opening track came on, I was kind of excited because the opening track is very bold. It feels anthemic. And it has these big, very sinister strings. And then that kind of very overbearing big noise just gave way to something that was just so laid back. And this would have been my answer for Flat, with 3 different answers for that, because it has this just kind of hazy atmosphere throughout that while it meanders, but it doesn't take you to any high anywhere. It doesn't take you anywhere. It feels like that the music is or that his voice is so monotone throughout, but surprisingly that's actually the thing driving the music forward. The actual songcraft or songmanship surrounding that, it feels like the voice is actually dragging the song along behind him, and it's just not got any dynamic aspect of it driving it forward at all. And that said, even though I feel like I've been pretty harsh with that, I didn't dislike it at any point. It just made me.
That doesn't really seem consistent with what you just said for the last 5 minutes. That's still what I've got to say.
It just made me want him to I don't know, just spend an extra couple days in the studio, polish these songs off, and then pretend that you care.
Exactly.
And it's obvious he's got a lot of talent. It's just the application, which sounds incredibly patronising, but I'm just
that's what we're here to do, is patronise. Come on, that's our fucking roles.
That's what I want from it, and it's definitely not what I got.
Okay.
Right, it's your pick, Nick, so let us know what you thought. It was my pick,
yeah. So, is it obvious that he's got any talent? Is it obvious? I just want to put that question out there first of all. The playlist order, I don't know who's listened to this ever saw the playlist that we had on Spotify we ran for last month, has Dean Blunt followed by Kele, and that really was a 1-2 punch of absolutely shite albums. Oh my God. It really was a struggle to get. And maybe that's even why the Law Mvula ended up being quite high for me, because this was a depressing start to a 6-album playlist, really, these two. To me, the album wants to come across as a modern-day lo-fi album. And those who know me from this podcast or elsewhere know that Sebado and lo-fi, the roots of that are something I've really, really loved and has kind of changed my musical life. So I was really interested in what went so wrong here in those terms, because it's kind of difficult question. I suppose in one way, I think maybe my taste has changed a little bit. So this low production, is I'm less focused on it than I was. I really wanted to get to something very, very basic 30 years ago, 25 years ago, and listen to this kind of stuff first. But also, I think that's maybe a bit too kind to it, because I think bands like Sebadoh always had something, first of all, beautiful vocals, which this certainly does not have, and really interesting, moving personal narratives, which this also, to me, does not have. This, to me, seems like a kind of drifting, pointless mess, and I think you both indicated the similar things, maybe not quite as strongly as I am right now, but that it was such a lazy album in a way, such a waste of apparently very little sort of time that was put into it, and it felt like it was wasting my time as well. I just didn't know why I bothered, really, except for the fact I was required to for under contractual obligation for this podcast, because it really just felt he didn't seem to care. The ideas were fleeting, badly pulled through and sort of developed, and just kind of half-assed all the way through. And then, as I say, I had to get through all of that and then on to the Kele, which we already discussed. So, just pity me, basically, because this was a fucking harsh go. Yeah, really.
It was hard, like the tempo of the first two. If we're going to start talking about the whole playlist, the tempo of the first two going right into each other, it was a slog. Yeah. And it did feel like, even though Dean Blunt was very short, it did seem to just go on.
Yeah, it didn't feel short. I agree with you totally. Yeah. I was like, fucking hell, when's this going to end? Yeah. It was sad because it sort of felt like I want to hear bands still trying to do stuff like lo-fi production. I want to see what that is, but this is not it. Or at least I hope this is not what it's become, because this is just half-assed, as I say, half-assed.
Yeah, it's also interesting talking about lo-fi, and that after we talked about the 80s excess.
Yeah, really couldn't be any more different, could it? Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people just were fed up of Rhythm Nation. And
and I think it demonstrates that I'm impossible to please, really, because Dean Blunt on one end and then Janet Jackson on the other, and neither one did I love, really, at least, so because one was too polished, one was not polished. Exactly. So, I don't know. It was
a middle ground for Nick. Have to start listening to Radio 2.
What do you reckon to the playlist, James?
Mixed. Ups and downs. Kele was surprising. That's a highlight.
It's really damning with fake praise, I've got to say. Your tone right now.
Yeah.
It's just like, yes, it was a playlist,
I'm
basically.
I'm trying to find positives.
A playlist.
I feel like I wrote one note for this section and I just went meh.
Meh.
It was rarely that I've felt when it's been a pick of mine, since I know the premise is that we don't know these albums going into it, and everyone should be aware of that. By the way, I just want to make clear, I didn't know this Dean Blunt was going to be as bad as this. But I actually got to the point where I was felt guilty. That I was like, Jesus, why did I pick this shit? So
I do. Even though we don't know what the songs are going in, I do hold you responsible for every pick.
Thanks very much.
Better or worse.
That's very kind. Thank you. I have such influence over your experience. It was a rough playlist, in short, for me. I only had two.
Yeah.
I thought the Stubborn Heart was the best. Although it sounds like James knows more about the previous album that was better still. Nothing else was great, and a couple of them were absolutely rough, as you know. So it was a pretty poor list on average for me.
Yeah, I 100% same. It's one of the, not necessarily the low watermark, but we're getting pretty close. And I'm now that I know there's a previous Stubborn Heart album, I'm not going to listen to any of these albums ever again. And I'll listen to the previous
Delete
Stubborn
the
Heart.
playlist. Delete the playlist.
Okay. So, hopefully there was one thing on the playlist that at least some of us liked. And so James is going to tell us about New Young Pony Club.
Yeah. So, I was going to mention the playlist there because we got through the slog of the over-the-topness and the boredom and the flatness. And I always knew at the end there was the treat of New Young Pony Club. I guess I took the advantage of picking it this time, knowing that Matt is a fan, at least of the first album. And with no Fran here, who I assume would not be a fan. Me and Matt make up a majority, so I don't really care what you think, Nick, to be honest.
You don't care anyway, come on, let's be honest about it. Can't be upfront about it.
But they're a band I've mentioned a lot of times in various places. I've written about them in different places on the site. I do feel like I go on about them a lot. I even got Tom to write about one of the albums for a blind taste test. So it was, I think it was about time that I did this. What I did was pick out, I have a copy of an old review that I wrote of them live.
What? Not for PBs, for some other site, you mean?
No. This is before the internet, basically. No, it's not that old. This is in a student fanzine called Rhythm Rag.
Love it.
And it's clear that I was very much enamoured with them, having seen them.
That is your writing high point. I just want to say, nothing you do on PBs will beat that fanzine name. That's incredible.
Yeah, interesting reading old me. Slightly embarrassing. But yeah, this is definitely the point where I fell in love with them, or more specifically, fell in love with her, aka Tahita Ulmer, the front woman for this band. What I used to do was, so it was fresh in my mind, and also because I'd probably had a few beers, which maybe helped writing, but always come back from the gig and write the review straight away.
Right. This is going to be great. I want to read the whole review, please.
Fresh. I'm going to read the whole thing.
Oh, please,
cover bands, the cover bands, the support bands. So I introduced Tahita in the first sentence as a sex symbol for the new rave generation. Big words from this unpublished writer there.
That's brilliant.
And so I'll skip on, and I will say, with us already on tenthooks, it was enough for Bulmer to strike a palpitation-inducing pose, as if seducing the entire gathering, to inspire utter frenzy.
Palpitations, love it. You managed to get palpitations.
Yeah. It was almost impossible to remove one's gaze from Bulmer then onwards, despite the band's collective good looks. She seemed to explode with pure sex during set close of the bomb, and sustained it beyond the climax and, oh yes, the encore. Yeah. Interesting insights. The pre-Me Too movement. Yes.
You got the word climax in for the end of the review as well. That's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. The editor of Rhythm Rag called me a perv after, but she still published it. So,
still ran it, exactly. Yeah, still ran it. So don't give me that shit.
There's a chance they might have been desperate. But there is more to it than that, than just my crush on Tahita. But yeah, they had 3 albums, although admittedly, calling myself a big fan, I didn't know they had a 3rd album until last year. But the first 2 albums, out of my big old pile of CDs, one of a very select few that still get played regularly. I always want to come back to them. At the start, it was very much quite a hype thing, in that sort of new rave era with the Klaxons and so forth. But they always went to kind of distance themselves from that, and it's very much their record company pushing them to go that way. They later fell out with them. I'll come on to some of that. But yeah, that was all part of the thing at the time. Every house party had glow sticks and laughing gas. So it was all wrapped up in that crazy time. But yeah, beyond on the looks, which I did touch in that old review as well, is her actual sort of power. She's quite small stature, but just the way she could bring the audience up and down. I've never ever before or since seen a performer who can do that quite so effectively. Absolute stunning live performance. Things didn't sustain on that level. Like I said, it was very much wrapped up in hype. They left their label, started their own label, produced their second album themselves. Obviously a lot lower budget. But
what year was that then? Do you know roughly?
That was 2010.
Okay,
second one came out. Got mixed reviews, little attention. I saw them at Festival later that year, and they seemed almost visibly upset about the reception to that, making sort of comments to the crowd about like how the new album wasn't any good. And we were really, really trying to reassure them. I mean, someone in the crowd at the time hastily made a banner, I don't know out of what, that said, "No, we love the new album," and held it up to kind of reassure them. But the more you listen to that second album, for me anyway, it's so much smarter, more grown-up, reflective. It's not so in your face, it's not glow sticks, it's more sort of seductively waiting in the shadows. It's actually lyrically much better. It talks about real issues and emotions and stuff, where there's all sorts of weird cryptic lyrics on the first album that don't make any sense, like the word confusianity. I don't even know if that's a real word. And these characters like the Peppermint Girl. Oh no, Peppermint Girl's not done. Don't know what the hell she's talking about. But in the second album, they're more actually saying the thing they want to say. Things to say about life, relationships, how they've been judged, how times had changed, really. And the more I listen to that now, still really, really love that second album.
Just to be clear, on the playlist, these are in order of release. Is that right?
Yeah, they are basically in order
I'm
of
with you then.
the
Yeah, that's
albums
fine.
and in order that they appear on the albums themselves. I didn't mix it up at all.
Right, great.
But yeah, the song "Lost a Girl" on the second album, "The Optimist," is my absolute favourite. Just the moment where that bass just kicks in before the chorus, absolutely stunning. I was driving around the other day in the car, just turned that up as loud as I could on my own, and I was just loving it. I was getting chills down the spine. Just it's still for that to have that effect on me now. It's totally removed from the sort of fashion, the hype, or the nonsense of the time. Yeah, it was fun when you were 21 years old or whatever. But now, being so much older and still getting that, I think that is the real thing that does it for me still. That makes me miss them a lot. If there was one band, other than like, Hendrix or somebody, if there was one band I could go back in time and see again, it would be Neon Pony Club.
And sorry, so where are they in sense of they're just disbanded and that's it? Is it? Are there any?
I don't think they ever really officially ended.
Okay.
They just sort of stopped. They do occasionally tweet about once a year. There's something still out there. Maybe they've moved on to other things. But yeah, there was a few lineup changes after the first album. They lost their original bassist, and by the third album, it was just the core partnership of Tahita and Andy. The songwriting partnership. The other musicians were sort of in the band and they played live, but they weren't necessarily writing the songs or doing the producing. It was always those two, the creative heart of it.
Right.
And after that, maybe they just had enough. Maybe they wanted to do something else with their lives. Don't know, but I don't think they're necessarily done.
It might not be over. They might come back. You never know.
Well, Lou Hayter, whose album I reviewed earlier this year, she was the keyboard player in Neon Pony Club, and she's still going DJing, writing her own music, got her own album out. So I don't know. This is don't give me this hope now. Slim.
Well, the other one you mentioned was Hendrix.
The
The other one you mentioned was Hendrix. So I think we've got a better chance with this than with Hendrix, have we not?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's true.
Yeah, stay optimistic.
We're gonna look at it like that.
We'll see how science goes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You never know. And then the jokier reason for picking it is so that Matt didn't have to go and pick another noughties band with a crap name from What I Love.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were so refreshing back then, because we had that. We've written a few of us, I think, about Landfill Indie on the site before, and that just became a sort of identikit grey sludge of the same guys from a northern town in skinny jeans and a white t-shirt with a greasy haircut. And this was just so refreshing. It was totally different coming along at that time. It was exactly what we needed, and so pleased they did.
Cool.
All right, Matt, what did you?
Yeah, that was awesome.
I'm done.
Yeah, I can jump in because we actually know that I'm gonna like this.
Yeah,
You knew it really well already. Yeah, you were really into it.
Yeah. Well, I really know the first album very well. Second album a little bit. Third album was completely new to me. And yeah, listening to this playlist, completely transports me back to that time, like at university, wearing my bright yellow neon belt and rainbow coloured t-shirts from Top Man and skinny jeans.
You still wear the neon belt. Come on.
Oh no, that's long gone. I'm a grown up now.
Picture that now. That'd be amazing when you're teaching and stuff. Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
the neon belt.
But I agree. They stood out, and I think one of the things I like reflecting back on it is, it felt like a lot of the bands at the time were just like a group of friends who have kind of like a punk band or something like that, and then they grab some keyboards and a synth, and then they start making something that's considered new rave. But like they felt like they were coming almost in the opposite direction, where they had some people who were more interested in the electronic side of things and were better at making something that was founded in synth pop, and then also put some guitars in, because that really was the thing at the time, and it worked a treat. And I also really respect your decision not to put Ice Cream on, because that was their song that made them massive. But it was just a novelty song.
Yeah, that's what all the hype was. It's not their best song. It was sort of sold to adverts, like IBM advert it was on before they even got big.
Yeah. And I think there was a big reason why they got drawn into that crowd of like you said, Klaxons and CSS and all of those guys. But it was really fun going back and re-listening to this and hearing like the kind of the loose bass guitar and the layered synths and the drum machines and stuff like that. And the newer stuff was really interesting to touch on as well, because it was much more stripped down and it was leaning more in this kind of electronic direction. So yeah, it definitely was that treat at the end of the end of the playlist that I got to survive through everything and then be like, yes. And it was
Party
pretty much the
end.
only thing. Yeah. Right. So what do you reckon, Nick? This was completely new to you.
Bring us all down. No.
This
is amazingly different experience in terms of our histories with this band. I did not know this band at all. I had no, I don't know, when you talk about their big hit and they were everywhere, and I mean, maybe I'm just wondering, I mean, other than the fact that I'm completely inept and know nothing about music, maybe the fact that I was in America during this period means I was a lot less connected to some of these bands, because I don't know if they made it over there, but I never heard of them.
For sure.
And the first album was nominated for the Mercury.
Okay.
Heard of it from that.
What year was that, would you say?
I guess it would have been 07 or 08.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I should know. I should be more aware. You know, there's a lot of things I should be. But no, I don't think I was aware of them at all. This was all. None of this music was kind of jogged my memory. But I enjoyed it. I generally found it was good, and I'm glad I got to discover it, because it was something. I felt like it was a gap. It was a point in time for me when I was in America where I was sort of longing to find more bands, you know, from this kind of period that I sort of felt distance from, you know. So and this was nice to go back and catch up with one of them, really, in a way. So I thought, actually, interestingly, when you talk about all the other bands like Klaxons and whatever, this band sounded a bit more like Talking Heads to me than any other band, honestly. So, certainly the early parts of the playlist, the Fantastic Playroom, is that the one? Is that the album title? Yeah. I got a sort of Talking Heads vibe out of it, in terms of the different instrumentation put together in kind of how am I going to put it? Like in these, not garbled sounds pejorative, but, you know, these kind of like interestingly odd ways. I thought that was kind of something that kept coming through to me, but I heard it more on the first album than the other two. But yeah, I found it. I liked it. I don't know that I have a ton of sort of detailed critique or anything about it, really. I thought that first album was more interesting to me than the Optimist, and the last one, and NYPC. Yeah, I seem to be able to grab onto that a bit more, and maybe it was this Talking, because I'm a big Talking Heads fan anyway. So maybe that was why. Yeah. Or maybe you both think I'm mad to suggest that connection.
No.
But
there's a lot more guitar on the first album than there is later. So maybe that's
might be it. Yeah. So yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I'm not going to rip it to pieces, as I have done so many other albums today. I'm glad.
Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to rip it to pieces. That's the gold standard. No, it was good, and I'm glad I got into it. And I will come back to them.
Cool.
But yeah, I don't know what else to add, really. It was something that made me feel, again, the kind of gap I have in my own knowledge of music over that period between when I went over to America in 2000, when I came back in 2015. I feel there was a very patchy awareness of what was going on, you know.
Okay.
So.
Well, now you formed your opinion of them already, you can go and listen to their single Ice Cream.
Okay.
And see if it rings a bell.
Okay.
And you can't hold it against them.
Fair enough. Yeah. And also, I was able to listen to the album without any of the enormous bias that would have been caused by seeing this singer, this incredibly beautiful, moving, sexual, creature of the singer, because I had no idea that was the case. So yeah, but to me it was just good music. So yeah.
I think we need to make that a regular feature. Everyone has to, because I haven't written for anything before, so I can get away with this.
Yeah, I've got some old blogs I used to write for and stuff. I'm sure I could pull that out together. Yeah. So
yeah.
So thanks for introducing it. Yeah. Cheers.
Cool.
No worries.
Yeah, it was good.
Glad you liked it.
So we're all done.
Yep.
So I just need to remind everyone that they should, if they want to hear more talking about music, they can, if they want to read more talking about music, they should go to pickybees.com.
Yeah. Or they could listen to the previous 43 episodes of this podcast.
Or they could listen to the 40,
which are also available on that website.
We have a big backlog. You could spend a couple days solid listening to us.
Yeah, we're always getting the full weekend of listening to us. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah. Lucky people.
And we're going to be back in like a month's time to talk about the nominations for the Mercury Music Prize.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to list them out, because there's a ton of them, but there's some exciting releases in that, and we haven't talked about most of them. So it's going to be exciting to go through those.
And we'll have Sam with us
and we're gonna,
again.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Sam always joins us for the Mercury, and Fran should be coming back, at least for a one-off special. So he's going to put his baby in the garden,
screaming in the background throughout. Yeah,
it's going to be great.
I give it a 20% chance he makes this. We'll see, but
we'll see, yeah,
he's he's
we're not going to hold him to it.
No. I'm not going to criticize him if he can't do it, but I just wanted to keep a book on it basically and see whether he does it. So, yeah.
But yeah, until next time.
And thank you, James. Thanks very much for coming on.
Oh, of course. Thank you, James. Yeah, and thanks for bringing something good. And again, taking the hit by putting something from the noughties on.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
All right. Speak to you all later.
Right. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.